the packaging related functions and the crash reporting functions are for the abstract classes, and there is currently an implementation to do this on Launchpad and an in-memory implementation. But as I said, there is currently someone who implements a Maxilla backend for that. So once we do have that, then I guess the uptake from other distributions will be even higher. Right now we just have 3 distributions which will use that. Well. Okay, well then, thank you.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do a quick brainstorm update and try to finish as early as I can so we can get the Eucalyptus guys up here. So, how many of you are not familiar with the site brainstorm.ubuntu.com? Not familiar. Who's never heard of this before? Okay, so to keep it simple, this is a website where our users can submit. Actually, hold on. How's that? I had slides, but I got rid of them, and I want to make this more interactive. So users say, "Hey, I have this great idea. I think Ubuntu should be doing this." So they come into this site, they log in with their QA username, and then they file their idea or whatever, and then other users on the site give votes. So since I gave status about this last UDS, and you'll see that it's a lot different since Nicholas deployed a new version. So as you see on here, I don't know if you can read this font, but there's 15,000 ideas, 94,000 comments, and 1.9 million votes. So we're definitely getting a lot of traffic on this site. So what happens is the user submit an idea and then they vote on it. So at first what happened is we got a lot of noise, right? I think this should do this crazy thing and that crazy thing. So we got a lot of duplicate ideas. We got a lot of generic ideas like, Linux should support more hardware. And it's like, well, yeah, it should be faster, and everything from that to like, Canonical should buy a game developer company and then come out with Game Ubuntu and all sorts of ideas like that. So we were getting a lot of duplicates, and it was really starting to become like a big swamp. We didn't have enough volunteers to filter them out, so ideas started getting crufty. So what we now have is this idea sandbox over here, where all the new ideas get shoved into here. And then we have moderators that come, and then they vote whether the idea is good or not. So they look for a duplicate, or it's usually... by now the site's been around so long that brand new ideas are really not that common anymore. So someone says, allow the user to choose a number of bookmarks to be displayed in places, right? And a whole bunch of you are thinking, yeah, I know that bug in Bugzilla or whatever. So I'm willing to bet that that's already filed in there as well. So what our moderators or community people do is they'll come in, and we have fields where they can link to a Launchpad spec, they can link to a bug, or to a forum thread where if users come to this, we actually give them a place where they can find an answer. One of the great things about Brainstorm is that it's really, really lowers the barrier for our users to communicate with us, right? We have mailing lists, which some users don't like, and then the forums, which are for people who don't like to use mailing lists. And then here, all they really have to do is make an account, and they can just give us an idea. So some of the feedback I've been receiving from you is like, well, I don't like to go to the Brainstorm. It's like, I already have to track my bugs, and now you want me to like triage ideas? Are you kidding me, right? So what I do at every UDS is I go and I generate a report for the track lead that shows the newest ideas based on the amount of votes forever, and then the number of ideas based on the amount of votes for those 6 months. For the 6-month cycle. And then I break that down by track. So, I can say, hey, Pete, here are the top requested brainstorms for the kernel and ever, and then here are the ones for, the last 6 months. So the top idea has always been fix, suspend, and resume. That is the title of the idea. Fix, suspend, and resume. So These aren't necessarily like bug reports or anything, but it kind of gives you vibes of what our users want. But I hear developers sometimes telling me, well, you know, some of those ideas are really crazy. But if you look at this, look at this idea here. This user here proposed this solution. And look at the amount of work this guy put into his mockup. Look at this. Right? He's got little workflow things and whatnot. Now, I'm not a designer, so I don't know if this is actually good or not. But what I want you to take out of this is that our users care enough to put this level of work into something like this. So I think it's important for us to embrace this as an opportunity as opposed to, oh crap, I got to go fill out, you know, some brainstorm stuff that I don't want to do because I don't have any time, right? And here's another example. So this guy here, this is, personally I think this is a horrible idea, but the point I want you to take here is that this guy was willing to take the existing mock-ups from our design team and then modify them on his own, right? So that's what I want you to take out of this, not that this is a good idea or not. That's actually not the point. The point is that we are having users joining in our prototyping process, right? And then there's a whole bunch of flame wars after. So this, the last thing I want to say today is, oops, I shouldn't have done it 24 hours. Let's just go like this. Right. So for all the packages that we have in the archive, we have a separate section in Brainstorm. So if you want to look at just totem ideas or rhythm box, or this is all of Ubuntu ever. So if you were working on a certain part of the stack and you just want to see ideas on the USB installer, for example, you can just filter those out. What I recommend to people is once a cycle, look through those, and then we give you access and you fill out the developer comments where you basically say, you know, I'm the developer of USB Creator. I think this is a good idea, you know, and then link it to the blueprint. Or, nice idea and stuff, but probably not. Don't worry about telling people no on Brainstorm. The idea is that I've listened to you. You know, this is still meritocracy. You know, the Ubuntu project runs the way it runs. But even if the answer is no, at least you're giving them an answer. Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here and attending this plenary session. My name is Daniel Nervi, and I am one of the original developers of Eucalyptus, which is an open source software infrastructure for on-premise cloud computing. So cloud computing, this is a topic that's really had quite a bit of interest over the last several years, and definitely over the last week. And we've seen that there's been this tremendous interest from a number of different user communities out there. Scientific computing users and researchers are very interested in cloud computing. We've definitely seen a lot of interest from educational facilities and projects. IT and data center administration, definitely interest in cloud computing. And finally, software development, there's just been a lot of interest. The problem that we observed just before we started this project is really that most of the offerings that were out there and that are still out there are fairly unique. They're closed. They actually cost money to use, and it's hard to see what's actually going on under the covers. The observation we made is that these user communities that express a sort of significant interest in cloud computing actually had access to their own resources. And so we thought to ourselves, why not allow users that have resources the ability to run a cloud computing system on those resources themselves so they can explore the idea of cloud computing. And that's where Eucalyptus came from. Eucalyptus is actually an acronym, and it stands for Elastic Utility Computing Architecture, linking your programs to useful systems. Before you clap, realize that acronym actually came after the name Eucalyptus. But in a nutshell, what Eucalyptus is a software platform that allows you to transform your resources into an Amazon EC2 compatible cloud computing system. And this means that with your own resources, you can have existing EC2 and S3 compliant tools that communicate with your own resources in the same exact way. And you get virtual machine control, you get the same network management infrastructure, S3 and EBS for storage, all in your own resources. It's open source, and it's based on a lot of different open source software and components out there. And this is really great because the system is something that, since cloud computing is sort of this new idea, the open source model makes a lot of sense. People can go in and change pieces of it and inspect the code, see what's going on. In addition, the system is designed to be extremely modular, so you can take pieces out, replace them, put other pieces in, and finally, it's very manageable. So even without changing the code, we try to make it as configurable as possible so that it runs in as many different environments as we can. So just a really quick high-level architecture of the system. It's fairly straightforward, sort of hierarchical design. The boxes in blue, I don't know if the colors really stand out, but the sort of boxes in this diagram represent the different components of Eucalyptus. At the very top of the hierarchy, we've got a component called a cloud controller, and this is the system that interprets the EC2 commands that are coming in from clients. It also does a lot of the state management of the system and user credential management, things like this. Also at that top level, there's a component called Walrus, which is the component that emulates the S3 API and manages storage to disk at the top of the hierarchy. In the middle, we have a component called a cluster controller, and this is really the piece that manages individual physical machines that are going to be running VMs. It manages collections of physical machines. And it also does a lot of the virtual networking that Eucalyptus does. At the same level, we've got a component called a storage controller, which manages some of the elastic block storage stuff. And finally, at the very edge of the hierarchy, we have a component called a node controller. And this is the piece that actually interacts with hypervisors to directly manage virtual machines. So, usage scenarios of Eucalyptus. There's a number of different ways that we found users are sort of interested in using Eucalyptus. The basic situation here is some users got existing Linux resources. They'll install some hypervisor on the nodes. We support 2 different hypervisors and in KPM. And then you install Eucalyptus. Typically what we see is a user will install the cloud controller, the Walrus cluster controller components on some fairly high-powered front-end machine, and then install node controllers on each node. Then an administrative user that has special credentials can go in and manage users of Eucalyptus and their credentials, and also manage their kernels and RAM disks and images that users can use to get started. And finally, the users that the admin sets up can interact with the cluster resources using existing EC2 and S3 tools. So, some specific usage scenarios I thought it might be interesting to discuss. These are things that we've seen sort of cropping up over the year. And the first one is that we thought was pretty interesting was the use of Eucalyptus as a planning and development platform. So we've seen a lot of people interested in installing Eucalyptus on a single or small set of resources so that they can develop virtual machine appliances for various clouds, be they larger Eucalyptus installations or Amazon EC2. We've seen a lot of interest in education, so people wanting to set up virtual classrooms, and these are projects that last for roughly the duration of a quarter or semester. But the benefit here is that you can install an entire virtual machine collection for students, and the students can interact with those machines however they want, and when the class is over, they just wipe them clean. And finally, recently there's been a lot of interest in this notion of hybrid clouds. And there's a number of different ways that people can use hybrid clouds where part of the cloud computing system is run on local resources and part of the cloud computing system is run off on public resources. One interesting thing that people are starting to talk about a lot is the use of the local resources for whatever load or service you've got running. And then when your local resources become exhausted, start pushing that workload out into the public cloud. And then when the load sort of dies down again, start pulling the work back to your private cloud. Another interesting use for hybrid clouds is basically to split your service into pieces that you really want to run locally for privacy, security concerns, and then find the other pieces of your services that are more appropriate for the public cloud. And Eucalyptus really allows you to do this using a uniform interface to all of the resources. So finally, just briefly about the current status of features of Eucalyptus that we've got in right now. The very current release is 1.5.1, and VM control, we've got EC2 compatible interface for VM control. The managed network features we currently support are Elastic IPs, security groups, which is basically the user-controlled definition of firewall rules between virtual machine groups. And we do virtual machine network isolation using VLANs so that VMs can share resources and have their layer 2 traffic actually isolated from one another. We have persistent storage features such as the S3 emulation I mentioned earlier. And we just added